And so we've got a great panel who have a lot of exposure to different mission-driven companies, including one founder, Doug Scott, who runs Ethic. And so he will give us the actual hands-on, on-the-ground view. And then we've got Maya Choringel from the Rise Fund, and Emmeline Shaw from Flourish. And both of them have large funds which are focused on mission-driven. So they've got a lot of experience in that space and are, I'm assuming, working with companies right now in crisis. And so I think I'm extremely interested to hear about what companies are doing and different approaches to the crisis in terms of managing the company itself, but also in terms of kind of turning the crisis to an advantage, to be able to engage and to be able to really help the communities that the companies are in. So why don't we start with Maya? And Maya, can you just tell us a little bit about some of the companies that you work with, what your focus is, and what your experience has been in the last month or so?
Sure. So can you hear me okay, everybody?
Perfect.
Great. So I'm Maya Koringal. I'm one of the managing partners of the Rise Fund, which is a fund within TPG that is very much focused on companies that purposefully and intentionally deliver social and environmental good. And among other sectors, financial services and fintech is a big stream of ours. And within the US context, we're very proud to be investors in Acorns, which is a big sponsor of this event, and on several panels, and Varo Money, where Colin Walsh will be on a panel later. And this is an interesting time for our fintech companies because in some respects, there are tailwinds for companies that operate in the digital sphere. Acorns is a savings and investment platform, and Varo is touchwood poised to become the first nationally bank chartered fintech, qualifying for the national bank charter through the OCC, FDIC, and Fed process. And because of the economic environment and shelter in place, digital access to financial services has become increasingly important to individuals. Acorns and Varo have both seen increases in usage. Acorns in particular, because it's in the savings and investing space, has and works with a lot of everyday Americans for whom Acorns was their first foray into investing. And this is an environment where the stock market has gone up and down tremendously. Much of the work that they've done has been around communication, information, around how to think about managing your investment account and savings accounts during this time of great volatility. People are attracted to Acorns because there are no minimums to actually start to save and invest. And so, the inherent benefits of the platform, I think, work for it in this environment. Varo, similarly, as a digital platform, offers fee-free checking, a lot of other features that appeal to everyday Americans. And Varo has a number of partnerships that it's working with others on, for example, Steady, enabling individuals to find work from home opportunities to try and boost their incomes, but all the basic features of fee-free access to investment accounts, savings accounts, checking accounts, etc., make it a very safe place to go to. And so I think both companies have seen tailwinds. They've both stepped up communication. They both offered access to their customers to ways to manage through crises that help them.
I've gotten a lot of Acorns emails focused on the crisis for sure, and very well done from Noah. Doug, I would ask you, sort of really logistically for Ethic, how you guys handled the crisis in terms of operations, in terms of communications, in terms of client relations, and all that sort of thing?
Yeah, obviously it's an interesting time, and I think for our business, much like other mission-driven businesses, there's this sort of unique time to double down on the purpose element And it's something that we've been really excited about. I mean, certainly there's all of the adjustments to remote-based work and remote-based engagement with the team and with our clients, which I think is similar things to a lot of businesses are facing. And fortunately, we were set up really well to be able to navigate that very quickly and seamlessly. But I think the most important, especially given the context of this this sort of panel, is really around the mission piece. And I think for us, in situations with high turbulence, mission becomes that North Star. It becomes that guiding principles to which we can help judge and assess what decisions need to be made and whether we are successful in the way we make those decisions. It's something that I think for us we've put in, and I know there's a lot of founders listening, so I'll try and focus as much on some tactics that we've used around that. But that has been something that both from a team perspective in terms of reinforcing our mission, as well as from a client and customer perspective, putting in sort of principles that allows us to have the mission create engagement. And it's something that we are very proud to be focusing on. And so some of the things we've done from a team perspective are around weekly gratitude sessions. So we run these weekly gratitude sessions and we talk about, at the all team session, calling people out for specific cultural successes. And obviously that's pretty closely tied. Our mission's around accelerating the transition to sustainable investing. So for our business, it's what's a great result of that? How can we celebrate the mission around that? I spent time doing one-on-ones our business is, still relatively modest size with 35 or so people. I did one-on-ones with every team member. I went through a lot of what's happening with their families, how they're adjusting, and how the business and the organization can be more supportive in the way that we operate, even if it's with doing shift work with people who've got children and being able to have to look after children during the day, things like that. We codify our mission and a lot of the work we do in new employee onboarding, and also in sort of an ongoing basis, we do mission sessions as a whole group where we can use catalysts and things that we've seen out in the world that we can use as sort of examples for us to follow. And then at the customer level, it's, this kind of quarantine and lockdown is something where more or less everybody is spending time with their families. And it's an environment where you get to appreciate what's really important in life. And our customers are no different. And so we work with wealth advisors and they work with their end clients. And so a lot of the work that we're focusing on is how we can help and coach wealth advisors to be able to engage with their clients during this time. And we create personalization around the issues that are important. And you have a unique connection to nature. I think I live in Manhattan, so I'm craving going outside in a nice forest somewhere sometime. But that kind of connection is something that really speaks to what we do as a business and what our service and product is. And I think, more broadly than our business, it's something that I think I try to encourage all founders to think through is, even if you're not an explicit mission-driven business, how can you create a sense of purpose that's beyond just an economic incentive? And that's something that I'm really passionate about. So I'm happy to chat with founders and others who are thinking through this situation. And this is a unique time to actually think about implementing it in short order, because the world's changed in a very rapid period of time.
I really do think that there are going to be some effects from this crisis that are going to last, and they're going to leave a mark on how business is done going forward. I think that's really interesting. Maybe you could talk a little bit about some of the companies that you work with and how they dealt with the crisis, or initiatives that they put together in response to the crisis.
Absolutely. So for just some context, I co-manage Flourish Ventures. We're a $500 million global early stage fintech fund, and we really invest in companies whose technologies advance financial health and economic resilience. In the US in particular, we're focused on the 70% of US Americans who live paycheck to paycheck. So as you can imagine, in the COVID environment, that percentage has only increased. And this notion of paycheck to paycheck as a bridge has been dismantled as a result of severe job loss. Against that backdrop, a number of our companies their services, financial services, are very much in need. If anything, the set of consumers who are seeking this type of opportunity has only increased. A bit similar to Maya's commentary, it's countercyclical in that regard. And the question is, how do you take advantage of that? How do you build loyalty? How do you continue to trust and how do you actually provide, if possible, immediate sources of, to address immediate needs. I'm just going to touch upon a couple of our portfolio companies who've gone beyond their core services and taken advantage of that. The first of which is Chime. So Chime Bank is an early investment of ours. And as you know, they continue to do some great work on their core free service checking, savings, overdraft protection, automated savings and the like, all of which very valued. Beyond that, last week they announced issuing $200 to over 100,000 of their Chime customers. This would be in advance of the CARE stimulus package. And in doing so, being able to give them the necessary bridge that's required today. That's one example of really taking their service beyond to really build that trust and loyalty and a sense of purpose with their current base. Another one is Steady, Maya had mentioned earlier. So Steady they aggregate both hourly and gig work opportunity for the 1099. And that was always very valuable, but in this current environment, it's extremely valuable because those are the only jobs that anyone can take working from remote, especially those who are unemployed looking to augment their income. They have done something pretty dramatic recently called Steady Support. And in doing so, they have taken all of their vast data, which is quite detailed, optimizing what employers are paying the most when across geos. So if you're looking for supplemental income, you can go to that site and be able to find out exactly where they should be applying for job opportunities. Beyond that, with Workers Lab help, they're injecting between 100 to 1,000 in various accounts to provide, again, immediate support for specific gig workers who are most in need. And they're able to determine that based on a number of different variables. Again, really rich data sets. They've also provided telemedicine support. Again, very important this time for these gig workers where they don't have health insurance. And finally, some ACH functionality to be able to get that capital to them quickly and immediately. The final example, and again, there are many, but these are just a couple to show how we can be creative in this time of need, is the Propel. So Propel is another investment of ours. They provide financial services for over 3 million SNAP recipients in the US, the food stamp recipients. They have partnered with Give Directly, and in order to do so, to provide $1,000 cash injections to those who are most needed, families, food stamp recipient families, and able to segment by geo as well for those who want to donate very specifically to a specific geography. We, for the first time ever, have actually donated $1 million, and coupled with Google, who provided $2 million, have kind of anchor funded this effort to try to really activate a much broader engagement across entrepreneurs, fintechs, technology writ large, and venture capital firms as well, hoping everyone can get involved here. But again, these are examples of taking their service, trying to find using the data they have to be able to target people that are most disproportionately in need and trying to provide services beyond what they are currently offering today. And I think that's going a long way towards building that trust and credibility in long term during this time of need for consumers.
That's great. I guess for Doug, are there any ways that you feel like you've pivoted your business at all? Or are there any ways in which you see the coming environment or changes that the COVID-19 epidemic has brought on will change your business?
Well, change, yes. I mean, in some ways, just for context, our business, we work with intermediaries who then work with lots of end clients. So this could be a wealth advisor servicing lots of clients. I mean, I think, sort of as I mentioned before, the principle around how we think about what's changing is this engagement element and sort of, and particularly the relationship between our clients and their clients. Because as the world goes more and more, as it's very remote and all of the changes that are happening on a social level, the ability to engage with clients is becoming more and more difficult in some places. And so because their priorities are shifting. And so for us, it's really how do we help facilitate that discussion and that communication flow between our clients being wealth advisors and their end clients, or our end clients essentially, in terms of thinking around social purpose and social impact. And it is interesting to see, for what it's worth, all of the evidence to date, and it's relatively sort of short term, of course, so there's a big caveat around that, but businesses that are focusing on performing well with their employees, with their stakeholders, with the environment, those businesses are typically more resilient, particularly in times of crisis. And so from an investment standpoint, that message is something that's being resonated from our clients. And so the ability for us to continually help facilitate those conversations and help understand the rapidly changing environment from a financial markets perspective, but also from an engagement perspective, and being able to translate the mission of an individual or a family into an investment portfolio is something that we're helping facilitate. And it's being able to do that remotely, and not, some of our clients are really well set up to do that and some of our clients aren't. And so helping them through those periods is something that we're kind of going above and beyond for.
Maybe a question for Maya. What do you think are some of the cultural traits of companies that successfully navigate crises in general, and maybe this one in particular?
Yeah, and maybe I'll link that to the kinds of companies we invest in that are really driven by purpose and mission. So I think, one of the characteristics of the kind of impact companies that Emmeline and I invest in, and that, Doug is a shining example of, is that the entrepreneurs we back think about bringing all of the skills and resources and capital partners to the table to build a very successful business. So there is, for our segment of impact investing, which is full commercial return oriented, a very keen focus on all of the characteristics that you look for to build a successful enterprise that will last over time. But because of the mission focus and the mission core, there is a fine and keen sense of what I'll call value creation for the end customer, as well as appropriate stewardship for the various stakeholders in the business, whether that's employees, the environment, society at large. And I think that mission-driven companies, and especially those that are living in the full return commercial end of the spectrum, already have in them a DNA that thinks about the ecosystem that they live in holistically, and valued creation all along the chain. And so when a crisis hits, there is a very natural response and responsibility towards employees, a very natural response and responsibilities towards customers. And the DNA of these companies are attuned to going the extra mile, to be creative, to solve problems, often mission-driven companies, because they're trying to create a sustainable, successful business, but also solve a big social and environmental problem at the same time, have an extra spike of creativity, resourcefulness, innovation, and that really comes to bear in an environment like this. So we gave examples of how it was very quick and natural for Acorns and Varo to respond to this environment to serve their customers. Some of our ed tech companies, in a slightly different sector, are very similar. So Dreambox, which is one of our other portfolio companies and is a leader in personalized K-8 math learning for students, all digitally delivered normally in the classroom, responded very quickly to bring its capabilities to consumers and customers and students who had to move to a work from home environment. And they did so by offering, in many cases, free subscriptions, so that those who were less able to environment, which many of us who are in more stable income segments take for granted, but it's not true for the vast majority of Americans, could access the same kind of learning options that other children were getting. And so again, I think that because mission-driven companies have this holistic view, have the creativity, have the entrepreneurialism, and are driven by purpose and therefore willing to work that extra hour to figure something out and get it out there, that's a benefit in times of crisis.
And maybe one for Emmeline. I think that issue of, you work with a lot of companies that deal with people who work paycheck to paycheck, you said. And I think that demographic has really, really been is in a really tough place in general with technology, and in a crisis like this is really, really hit disproportionately, stuck in wherever they're at, having to work, having no money for food. I guess, how have some of the companies you worked with dealt with that? I mean, it seems like just a brutal crisis environment. It seems like there's some charity outreach work, bridging, and things like that. But what about from a technology perspective? Is there anything there in terms of like helping people to get better connected or helping people get more information more quickly?
Absolutely. Again, what's shocking is the problem is so broad, right? 70% of US Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. So this is not just a low income problem. Obviously, it's been more exacerbated across some of those demographics. But that being said, I think the companies are very much seeing themselves as being that source of everything from the simplicity. Early on, I think Kristen was on saying how hard it is just to apply for unemployment. I think they tried to run through the flow. So just an example of across, on a national basis, how do you actually apply for unemployment insurance? How do you think about all the other government benefits? Are you eligible? We have one company that does it for student loans. How can you actually think about summer? How can you think about being available for income-based repayment and actually pausing your student loan payments during this time of lack of income? So there are a number of companies that are taking both an information approach to how do you actually access different ways of additional income? How do you think about pausing certain services in order to defer payments? But in addition, I think that they're actually just searching for a number of different opportunities beyond the technology piece. I think I'll pause there, and then maybe I'll circle back on a couple of other examples, but I want to make sure other people have some opportunities.
Mm-hmm. I guess for Doug, something that's interesting to me about Ethic, and I'm curious, is there was a huge upswing in impact investing, in the last 4 or 5 years in the U.S. from my perspective anyway. And how do you think the crisis affects that? Do you think it makes people more likely to be interested in impact investing in ESG, or does it all become about like the bottom line and returns from the end client perspective to your advisors that you sit on the other side of?
Yeah, well, I can talk through the lens of sort of the ESG world, and Maya and Emily are much better poised in this sort of true impact in venture capital and private equity investing. I'd say for our clients, the themes of ESG, which has always been about resilience and robustness of companies, that, as I said, companies that treat their employees well, treat their shareholders and stakeholders well, treat the environment well, typically outperform on a long-term basis. That being a thesis that sort of sit behind the broader ESG thematic. And it's interesting to see in turbulence that is playing out. And the businesses we're all talking about, or that Emily and Maya are talking about, and our business, of course, as well, all private examples, but that exists in the public markets too. So that same sort of competitive edge in terms of the ability to engage your team, the ability to engage your customers and create loyalty, especially during times of crisis, is not something that goes away. In fact, it's something that gets doubled down on. And then so that is being, at least it has been demonstrated in even in the early days of this crisis, that those businesses are more resilient to these circumstances and have set in place systems and infrastructure to be able to cope with this from a team perspective, but also from a customer perspective. My view is really that ESG, this is continuing to push ESG and sustainable investing as a core of what's going to be. I mean, our view is in the world there won't be a distinction between sustainable investing and regular investing. It'll just be investing. And so that thesis is starting to play out, and this has always been the big stress test coming. And it's still early innings in terms of the financial markets, but it's positive in terms of what's come to date, and I think that will continue.
I love that line of thought. I really think that crisis in general can strengthen your community, whether that's your customers, the ecosystem that you work in. It can be really a bonding agent and an opportunity to really deepen those relationships. I think is really interesting. So I will put each of you on the spot for one little last round of so we've got founders tuned in, and if you were going to give the founders of startup companies one sort of takeaway for how to deal with crisis, and this crisis in particular, what would that be? What is sort of most important? And I did it jump ball style, but Doug, you can go ahead and take it.
I'm happy to kick things off. As I said, one of the things, sort of related but different to ethic, is all about mission-driven businesses, and I think this is a unique time in the world to double down on your mission, and those that don't have an explicit mission to really foster the development of one, and to create something that has a purpose that's bigger than just an economic outcome. So for me, as I said, I think it's such an important aspect to think about the ways you can improve the lives of your stakeholders through your product or offering. So that would be my one takeaway.
Great.
So my takeaway, can you hear me? I'm not sure if this is we're twofold. I think we need to focus first internally. So I've been now through in venture investing since 2000, so I've seen a couple of downturns. The internal focus on the company is going to be very important. So how are you investing in your own employees, their own well-being, their own mental health? A number of our companies have already brought together a series of facilitators to work with our CEOs, and they, by extension, engage a number of their own companies to make sure that they can not only get aligned with the new normal, but to be excited to both mourn the shift, the change that's happening, but also be excited for what's ahead and how to be creative and innovative. And I think that's so important in this time. Maya touched upon it. And I think in particular, when you're mission-based, you actually have a unique relationship that's different. You have a very close relationship with your consumer typically. You understand a lot more than most fintechs do. And to your point, Jim, they are more vulnerable. And so try to think through, how do you create new technology services that really address a new set of needs in this new set of normal? So Jim, we did mention early on about study and using telemedicine as an example of a service that was needed. We're seeing companies, some of our other portfolio companies, think about not just providing information, but how do you bridge the gap? Can we technically actually access some of these new government sources from a technical perspective, so it becomes very easy in what is a pretty legacy-based system? How do you think about taking conversations and new pain points that emerge from your consumers and providing new product offerings, right? How do we boost engagement so they become the place to go in this time of need? And I think every one of the fintech entrepreneurs out there have something, an edge, an angle, a service that's really valuable. And the question is, how do you take advantage of that and really think creatively about deepening that in a meaningful way? And that would be my push and my encouragement to this group.
Jim, and I know we're out of time, but just build on what Emmeline said. I think the beautiful thing about companies that have purpose and impact is that they live in an ecosystem that is more collaborative. And you can reach out and work with government agencies. You can work through the angle of policy. You can work through the angle of partnering with nonprofits to do things. And it's a more natural space to speak the language, not just of business, but of policy and of the true sort of philanthropic do good for the world. But move quickly. There is nothing like not hesitating and taking action when a crisis is upon you, and leaning on your partners, leaning on your equity investors, your venture firms. Expect and demand a lot of them, because they're supposed to be there to partner with you. And that's also a call to choose your partners wisely, because in a time of crisis, you know how important these partners are, your equity partners or your ecosystem partners. So words to the wise for the future, but thank you.
Thank you all so much. And I'll take the moderator's say, my takeaway would be take it head on, right? Don't curl up or shirk from anything. Look your challenges straight in the eye and take them on, and use all the resources you have to tackle whatever you need to tackle, but take it head on. Don't back away, like rise to the occasion for it. So thank you all so much. This was great. I really appreciate your time and appreciate all of you who came today.
Thanks.